Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us today. Today, we're going to be discussing the what's new in Terrasolid for 2020. We're just going to leave a minute or two for everybody to get here, and thanks for your patience. My name is Matthew Stevens. I'm going to be moderating the session for today, and I'm going to be joined by GOQ Support Manager Derek Wag. And again, we're going to be going over what's new in Terrasolid for January 2020. At this time, I would like to go ahead and do an audio check. Please notice the raise your hand button has been circled in red on the slide. If you can hear me, please click this button now. All right, good. It looks like everybody can hear me. Group audio has been disabled for this session. If you would like to ask a question, please use the question box in your GoToWebinar panel. This is going to be a 60-minute session, and we're going to have some time at the end to answer a few questions. But if you could, answer questions throughout. We'll try to answer your questions during the webinar. But if we, for whatever reason, we can't, get to your question during the webinar, we'll definitely follow up after the webinar with some email answers to those questions. So for now, joining me is Derek Wag, and I'm going to hand over the presentation to him.
Thank you, Matt.
Let's see.
Yeah, it's like it's not. There we go.
Right.
All right, before we get started here, you should be seeing a page off of our searchable knowledge base. Just explains the license changeover. Just want to talk a little bit about the version 20 and kind of what's new. Unlike most software, like for example, our LP360 product, we released 1 or 2 major releases in a year, and there's a whole pile of new features in it. What Terrasolid does is they release regular updates. As you saw in 2019, we had 30 releases of the TerraScan product. And a number of each of the other products over the course of that year. The major version number corresponds to the maintenance year, and so maintenance expires for 99% of the people with the calendar year. And to kind of keep maintenance in line and the product updates all organized, so does the product changes over with major versions. So we currently are running version 019, and version 020 will be available, should be any day now. They're working on kind of the final pieces of it. I was using it last week, and actually I've been using it this week as well. Just trying to get that going. And so you see there's like minor updates between the last version of 01930 and 020.001. We are going to be covering a number of new features. There are presentations available on our searchable support knowledge base. If you look up what's new in Terrasolid 2020, you'll see the presentations are available for download. And I'm going to highlight a few of the new features as we go through this webinar today. We are recording it, so you will have a chance. An email link will be sent to you afterwards, plus this page will be updated once the recording is available, and you can access the recording via this page as well. Before we get too far along, let me just cover what products we're actually talking about today. And so we're talking about the Terrasolid LIDAR processing family. So it's typically 6 different products that pertain to LIDAR processing that Terrasolid produces. They have a number of other products as well. You know, the typical workflow, kind of an aerial standpoint, or in some cases, if you change the wording around a little bit, it applies to mobile and other types of platforms as well. Runs through the different modules that give you access or capabilities of doing different types of data and different things with your data. So TerraScan is a point engine. It's what holds all the points. Is what allows you to do functions like classification and you know, exporting of those point clouds to different formats, things of that nature. TerraModeler is the vector engine and the surface engine. So it's got a number of tools for dealing with surfaces and a number of tools for using the LIDAR surface to manipulate your vector elements. TerraMatch is the matching tool. That's got all the algorithms for trying to take two different, either different data sets and match them together, or for doing relative corrections within a data set, or for doing absolute corrections to make sure your data set fits your ground control correctly. This tool applies across the airborne platforms, whether that's traditional aerial or UAV. And it also applies to mobile platforms as well. So there's matching algorithms for both in there. TerraPhoto is anytime you want to deal with anything with imagery. TerraPhoto's got a number of capabilities from something as basic as trying to give you the best image that sees a feature to something kind of more traditional aerial photography, doing aerial ortho rectification. Or even doing full point cloud colorization in, you know, say a mobile data set, or various other ones where you want to go in and stitch all the different colors together and ensure that you've got good matching between the colorization to get a good 3D image. Terra Stereo is the package that's used to take LIDAR data into stereo. So you can do direct compilation and microstation connect off of your LIDAR point cloud, and some new feature that I'll discuss briefly today allows you to do some classification in stereo now as well. So that's the product family we're going to look at. So we're going to go through some of the new features that are in the Terrasolid products today. I've lost my presentation. So we're going to, first off, I want to just touch briefly on Terra Stereo. Terra Stereo's got a number of new features. I don't have my machine currently set up to run this one, so you know, even displaying it in mono isn't the best view anyways. But there's a number of improvements in Terra Stereo for handling much larger point clouds, for taking advantage of some of the newer NVIDIA boards like the RTX 8000 board, which has 48 gigabytes of memory and can store basically 2 to 10 billion points, depending on your point density and the channels that you're using for display. That allows you to do things like take an entire very thick point cloud like this one of Houston and display it all within the views. There are tools within Terra Stereo that allow you to do some automatic cross sections now. For instance, with this, this is a facility example at a finished waste facility, and you can kind of use an automatic cross section to cut your way through the data and visualization. I'm a horrible stereo compiler, so I'm not going to try to even show you any of this stuff in the views. But a couple of the new things in here, there's a bunch of tools to use the group classifications for cleaning up your data set. So you can visualize your point cloud in stereo and then use some of the different selectability of groups to remove or basically reclassify points from the cloud and move them into different classes. It's pretty slick when you see this done in stereo. There's the ability to trim up the groups now. Anybody that's trying to do very group specific things is seen. There are often times when your vegetation will meld into your poles, and you need some way to kind of separate those out, both from a classification and group perspective, and you can do that now using Terra Stereo. So those are a few of the new features that have been added in, and again, these are features that have been added in over the past year. They're available now, and when you get the version 20 software, it'll encompass all of these new features in there. On TerraMatch, we have added in a new tool when you do define, or when you go to add a point to the ground. Redo a thing, but when you add point to ground, there is a new surface option in here where you could take the dominant surface, the high or the low surface. And the main reason for that is when you have situations, for instance, in this pipe data set, we're trying to match the data sets using these labels. And the label sits here on the top of the pipe, but the mobile scanner system, as it drives through, also sees some of the ground down underneath the edge of the pipe. And the other method only looked for at one surface. It wouldn't, and it would give you the dominant surface all the time. And so now you have the option of telling it, when I want to add things in, which of these surfaces do you want? And that enables me to use the semi-automatic approach of adding in these ground points for doing observations and use those features now to match the different drive passes together. So that's one of our biggest new features on the TerraMatch side. TerraPhoto has had a couple new features to it. Probably one of them that was very recently added in is the ability to import in your Pix4D project. You import in the Pix4D camera file, and you import in the external or the EO parameter text file that Pix4D writes into its project folder when you do an export. And what TerraPhoto will now do is convert that over. It creates a TerraPhoto camera. It does do this currently. This is a one camera import. So if you've got more than one camera on your system, then you would do this import multiple times to create the separate cameras. Another big change is in the rectification of textures. Oops, always forget to select first. Is the rectify, there's now a rectify walls and roofs is covered all within the rectify textures. Included in this is a new naming scheme. And it's recommended that you use a new naming scheme because if you're using a large number of features, then the naming that's used here is a centroid to the feature, so it will have a centroid for each building, and it makes it much quicker and easier for the software to find the images because you get one image, one texture image per roof of the feature, but you get one per wall, and so you could have multiple walls on a building, especially more complex ones. And that can lead to a large number of images that are in your design file folder structure, and that could lead to slower performance. So it allows you to kind of set those in here and produce these different images. At the moment, you have an option, and this option applies only to the rectify walls portion as to whether you're going to use a single image up to a certain number of best images that sees the wall. Depends on kind of how well your images are, how well they see the walls, how large those images are compared to your walls as to what options you want here. Obviously, if you can do a whole wall with one image, you don't have to worry about how well the images match from wall to wall or from image to image on that same wall. That option will probably also at some point during 2020 start applying to the roofs, but at the moment it does not. The other thing you'll see on this dialog is typically you're deciding which image you want to use. Ideally, we use our nadir image for nadir images to get the roofs. That's going to get the best view of it. And we use our oblique images to pick up the wall surfaces. If you don't have a camera system that has both oblique and nadir, then you'll have to modify the parameters here so that it doesn't weed out those particular images that you only have and want to use. What it allows you to do is you can create up textures of your buildings, for instance, and then you've got these walls and roofs, and then when you get into doing fly-throughs or various other scenes, these give you really good analysis. Part of new features that is in TerraScan is there's now ability to write and read building information from 3D City database, and that information includes the textures. So you can use the software now to update existing databases and do comparisons between older data sets and newer data sets to be able to do that update process. I don't have a database set up on my machine, so it's not going to do me very good to try to demo those particular tools to you. In TerraScan, a number of new features have been added kind of late last year, just before the version 19 release, and into I guess just before version 19, then into early version 19 release, were some tunnel related tools that were added in. On my draw, so there was a ability to, for some reason I'm missing that toolbar. Well, I'm missing that tool in here for some reason. Let me show it on Connect. There's a vectorized tunnel section was added in. We talked about that last year during the new features webinar presentation. Shortly after that was a check tunnel sections was added in, and that gives you ability to create a workflow that will take you through each section and allow you to validate the section, and then through the validation process, you can through that validation process, you can mark them. You can tell which ones are fixed up so that you've got a single cross-section element in that area, and gives you this little workflow so you could tell which of them that you've already visited and be able to kind of revisit that piece. So added to that is some new capabilities for working with tunnels, and one of the things that's often found in them that we're trying to locate are the pipes. So the find pipes utility is something that was added in. It requires that we've computed normal vectors, and we can use the find pipes utility to do two things. One is classify the pipes. So it will locate the pipe features. It's looking at the diameter. So you want to put in a diameter that's slightly smaller to slightly larger than the size of the pipe that you're looking for. And this tool can be used both for mobile driven tunnel systems and also for terrestrial tripod mounted scanner systems. There's a slight difference in how you do the computation of the normal between the two data sets, because with a mobile data set, you've got a trajectory, and with a terrestrial or tripod mounted scanner, you don't have a trajectory, but we can add, we got a couple different capabilities for adding in a scanner position to the data set, or for using a vector element to set the normal vector. And that's very important, so we can figure out which way the different shots came from. So the find pipes utility, we can use it here, find pipes. So that's the utility there. The other option we have with the find pipes is to draw a line string, where the line string is going to give us the center of the pipe, and then we could always offset that if we need to know the top of the pipe, which is usually what somebody trying to design, like a new pipe or new electrical to run down through that system. That's what they're going to want to know where that is. So the draw a line string gives you that capability. Whether you run it before or after doing wrong view, view 4. Whether you run it before or after, I'm gonna change again, view 4, try that again. Here's an example of it run on the data set. So whether you do that before or after running the classify routine tunnel surfaces, which was introduced last year for finding the floor and the walls and the roof of the tunnel, will depend mainly on the capability to extract those pipes. So in this example here, the pipes are very clear. They sit in front of the walls, so it makes sense to find the pipes before running the classified tunnel surfaces. Of course, one of the big advantages of classifying the tunnel surface is do what I did here. I'm able to remove the roof and one of the walls and be able to show you the content found within that tunnel. And definitely as you're going through and doing the classification process to try to classify the features within that tunnel surface, it's really handy to be able to remove out the known features. So that's the process with this data set. This is I've now lopped it down to a much smaller piece, only about 5 million points, but when it was a much larger piece of the data set, it takes a few minutes to run, so I won't actually run that find pipe, so I'm just showing you the result here. And then of course, once you've found the pipes, then it makes things really simple when you want to do classification. Let me find my feature of other features in here. Because we've removed the pipe, then classifying the support structures, makes things a lot simpler. The floors already been classified, the pipes already been classified. Then the manual process of finding these additional features and removing them from the data set or putting them into their own classes is much, much easier as a result. I said this is so it's useful for both mobile and terrestrial scanned tunnels. And so a couple new features have been added in. One last year for dealing with scanner positions allows you to import in and create a trajectory off of a known scanner positions. But oftentimes we don't know where the scanner was, but a tripod scanner system has typically some very telltale signs of where it was scanned from. And what was added into TerraScan in the past year is the ability to compute this information now, as long as each scan has a unique line number. So for tripod mounted systems, it's very important that we know each scan in the similar manner that we want to know with airborne each flight line or with mobile each drive pass. What the software will do is it will look at these void areas. It's a fairly circular void area that's typically produced. It locates that and it's going to compute the average. It's going to compute that's the center of that void area and mark that as the tripod location. Knowing that location is quite important because we can then take full advantage of a number of the standard tools in the TerraScan suite, such as doing things like classifying by range from scanner to be able to remove those longer range and typically lower accuracy points from your data set prior to doing any type of classification work. It also allows us to do things like compute the normal vector, and the normal vector can then be used in both classification routines, looking for things like walls and other types of features. There was a change made in the vegetation indices. So vegetation index was added in both from a visualization standpoint and also for classification. And now it's been added in the capability to actually do these, I think we're up to 6 different formulas. And it was added in because not, in a standard LAS format and likewise in the standard fast binary format, your data is a typical red, green, blue, near infrared channel order. And there are some data sets out there that's not the case, especially if you've got some multispectral information that's been embedded in. LAS format only allows you to have 4 channels, so those 4 channels may not represent the standard for different bands. Whereas the fast binary will allow you to have 10 bands within its storage format. So you kind of have these different capabilities, and so you get to decide, not only what channel or what channels you're using, which one is the A and B channel, but you also get to decide on which formula makes sense for you. They did say that if you want a formula that's not here, they're quite willing to add additional formulas in. The ability to give the user ability to kind of write their own formula. It was very complex, and so it's much easier to put the standard ones in here, and if you need additional ones, we add it into the software as see fit. So that's one change that you'll see. That's the difference of the user-defined ones versus the out of the box. If you curious what formula is used out of the box, if you can look on our searchable knowledge base for vegetation indices, and we indicated in there the formulas that are used, and that was in, I think it was last year or the year before last that was introduced into the software. If we draw a section, we end up with a depth to that section that's defined by that box. And if you use a move section, you'll see that the traditional options have always been full view and half view. And in some cases, if you use full view, what would happen is when you moved the box along, there'd be a small sliver of information, particularly if you're doing reclassification work, you'd find a few points that weren't getting reclassified. It's a bit of an issue with microstation, and so a new option was put in to, and it's the default, which is now to view by almost the full depth, so that you'll get a little bit of overlap, and that'll ensure that you don't get any gaps between one section view and the next section view. So that's one of the changes that was added in there and why that was in there. couple new options just added into the find danger objects. It's often been asked, particularly some of our customers that are doing different work with vegetation management of power lines. They're looking for an offset distance from the power line. So there's been an XY distance and a vertical difference put into the reporting that you can do from the find danger objects utility, and those will write out to the report. On the project side, you may have noticed a couple new tools in here, and one of them is I have to put new project first. You have to have a project, but we can create a project by using files. What this is going to do is this allows you to create a TerraScan project when you have LAS files, but you don't have the information that goes along with them. And so what this is going to do is just read the header information from each LAS file, and it will produce a project block with the min-max extents that are found within the header of that LAS file. What that means is if you've got really nice gridded data, there's a good chance you'll get a fairly nice index out of it. But because it is reading the min-max extents, those min-max extents will not always be butt matched. You know, if you don't have really high density data, you know, your nominal pulse spacing will generally play a role in how well those indices align to each other, how much there may be an overlap in some cases in there. But the main thing here is that it does give you a quick way of generating from files. The file, of course, is dependent upon your different file formats. And so one of the formats that was added in as a storage format is a GeoTIFF. This allows you now to use TerraScan to make edits to your DEM or DTM files that you've produced in the GeoTIFF format. And that's going to give you full functionality, you know, of your classification routines and everything like that. Any questions so far? All right. So you may have noticed that I have been working in a product here that probably looks a little unfamiliar and quite different from microstation, and that is a product called spadex. Spadex is a new CAD platform where you can do a lot of the standard vector manipulation, generation, viewing, modifications that you would do in microstation. All of the Terrasolid applications, with the one exception, actually I should say the two exceptions at the moment are Terra Stereo and Terra Survey, but the other four, TerraScan, TerraPhoto, TerraMatch, and TerraModeler, have all now been developed and operate on this spadex platform. Users that have been kind of following along with changes to the product over the past year will have noticed that all of the dialogues that are Terrasolid dialogues now indicate the Terrasolid icon in the upper left corner. And this was a migration from the very old MDL style dialogues to the newer Windows style dialogues. This was necessary for two reasons. One is we have now on some of these dialogues and more to come, standard type of window functions like being able to scroll your mouse wheel to go through lists. One that will be coming is the ability to resize, but it's not there, but we'll see it on some more of the dialogues this year. The main effort in the past year was to get ported off of the microstation dialogues, and by porting off of the microstation dialogues, Terrasolid is able to now offer the package and a platform that is not Bentley reliant. So it's no longer the case that you have to have a Bentley product in order to run the Terrasolid packages. This was a huge undertaking. So for many users that have been with the product for a long period of time, you'll have noticed that there hasn't been quite as many changes and modifications and new features that were added to the product in the past year. And this is why the vast majority of effort has been put into doing this separation. That conversion effort was a big undertaking, but it really allows now for this application to start seeing itself present in other platforms. And the big thing is right out of the box is it removes the requirement for Bentley. The underlying source code is the same between the different products. So almost all functionality found in the microstation editions of the product are found in the SpadX edition of the product. There are some exceptions to that I'll talk about. Pricing wise, SpadX is included with your Terrasolid licensing. So there is no additional cost to run your Terrasolid in a SpadX application. You have the option, in fact, Terrasolid doesn't really have any preference for whether you run their application on microstation or you run your application on SpadX. That's completely up to you. The license provided is very similar in nature to how currently you can run a 32-bit Bentley product or a 64-bit Bentley product, and the license is the same license for each. Now you use the same license and can run one of the Terrasolid products on the SpadX application. That means there is no change in pricing for existing customers. If you're on maintenance, your maintenance stayed at the same rate. You just have the option that you may now run on SpadX instead of microstation, or if you desire, you can install both and run on both platforms. So why go to the SpadX platform? A really big driver for this is a large number of users who always ask the question, why do I need microstation? Can't I just run Terrasolid? I just want to do point classification, particularly shops that are AutoCAD shops and don't really want to buy microstation. They just want to be able to use Terrasolid products to classify and create vector elements. And now they have that option. From an evaluation standpoint, it makes things a lot easier because you can just put SpadX on and your Terrasolid license works with that. You don't have to worry about getting extra seats of Bentley product in order to be able to run, and combines the pricing into one. Like I said, it's practically the same. It's practically the same functionality in both products. The tools, if a new tool is added to the if there are new tools added into the product for microstation, you will see it also appear in the spadex version and vice versa. There might be just a very slight difference in how it handles some of the vector features. Would be about the only side, and for the most part, the package will handle that itself, provided that it doesn't have a limitation against those vectors. Yeah. Why is that not working? Why would you stay on microstation? Well, microstation has a whole slew of tools that spadex does not have. It has much better data exchange capabilities. It's more reliable. Spadex is not a mature package yet. And oftentimes, one of the big reasons for staying on the microstation platform is you're running other types of tools that also use microstation. And of course, the other big one is you've been using microstation for years and you may not wish to switch out of it. There are some things that spadex will become better at doing. It isn't currently, but there are some things that we expect it. One of the big things there will be more control for the visibility and display order. That's definitely not there at the moment. The visibility display order is kind of dependent upon which way you order load the packages in. So one of the things I always have to remember to do is load TerraPhoto before I load in TerraScan, so that my points load on top of my images. But there will be more capabilities in terms of stereo viewing and some full 3D depth control that we've not been able to get out of the microstation products to date. So there's a few reasons. Like I said, they do come from the same source code. The functionality will be pretty much identical, but there's going to be some limitations. For instance, spadex doesn't do anything with cell libraries. So something like the find poles utility, which is going to use the libraries for placing vector elements on the features. So the example features poles. Then spadex doesn't have that capability to do that. Spadex also doesn't deal with custom line styles. So we use custom line styles in things like draw profile, tool in TerraModeler. So that would be something that you wouldn't be able to do. Basic recommendations is, you're not losing anything to try working with spadex and see what you can do with it and where it fits into your workflows. I believe that probably existing shops and larger shops will always have some seats of microstation, particularly if you've done some heavy, productivity things in microstation to help with your Terrasolid workflows. If you're working with GOQ, and you're integrated where you're launching and driving things, currently that's only capable in the microstation versions. We don't know yet what the capabilities will be able to do something similar with spadex, but once we do, then we'll pass that along. In the version 20 release, what you will see is that there's going to be a combined installer that will have both the compatible spadix version that goes with the particular release of Terrasolid. I'm trying to find it, but now I don't know what I did with it. So I can't show you, but because it's going to be one of those, an initial piece that spadix will need to have, it's going to have a version that's compliant with the version of TerraScan. So it will be important that you have the same version of spadix that is certified compliant with a version of TerraScan, etc. Right. So what is spadix? Spadix is it's a 3D CAD system. It's got its own file format, and it's called an SPX. So that's its own format. It's capable of having a number of different vector element types, lines, polylines, points, polygons, ellipses, arcs, curves, text, elements, symbols, etc. It can, the SPX file stores these different vectors and attributes that are associated with the vectors. And it has the ability to load applications on top. And so we do an execute, and we're able to load our TerraScan or one of the other Terrasolid modules. The Terrasolid modules look very similar in spadix than what they do in the microstation edition. Big difference is you don't have a ribbon, you have the old toolboxes where you have a main toolbox and then the toolbars that are associated with each one of those. Spadex is stores coordinates in a 64-bit decimal value, and it'll support up to 4,096 layers. I don't know why the layer's not switching dialogues. There are some limitations, in terms of the ability to rename layers and things like that at the moment, but that will eventually change. You do have a number of different views that you can open, both mono views and stereo views. You can look at the different views. You can use up to 8 view windows. The views can be orthographic, perspective, or stereo. And the whole user interface is built off of some Qt libraries. So when you install it, there'll be part of the license accepting is accepting the Qt library licenses. So the main tools that are missing at the moment is, we've got a layer tool, but there's not a good way to create, name, or delete existing layers. So it's very limited in that capability. The ability to organize and tear out these toolbars, they don't exist. So it makes things a little bit trickier once you're used to, especially after you're used to using the ribbon and MicroStation Connect. There's currently not a way to exchange vector files between MicroStation and spadix. Spadix can read a version 7 MicroStation design file, but nobody uses those anymore. So we expect that'll be something that'll some exchange here will come up within the next few months this year is the expectation. But initially definitely classification work can be done in here. Any of the vectorizing routines that create text files that you can then take into MicroStation and use those text files to create vector elements. That gives you one way to exchange information from one side to the other. There are what do we call them? We call them in spadix called spatials. And spatials is your key ends. And you can also associate function keys. Now I'm drawing a blank this morning on what those are. Oh, shortcuts. So we can associate not only function keys, but any key sequence can be associated with the key-in commands that are that you're used to. So there's a variety of ways to set up, productivity gains here to use different, different key-in sequences for switching between tools. What did I do? Oh, I moved section in the wrong view. That's what I did. So I can hit F2 and it switches to the classify. I can hit, I think Control K was Control K was the other one. Yeah. So there's a couple of different ways you can set up the productivity on this side. Couple things that are missing, like I mentioned already, you can't exchange vector files with other CAD platforms, and there is no fence tools. So all of the fence tools require me to draw a polygon and then select that polygon in order to do things like classify inside fence or delete by fence, things of that nature. We will look to do a couple things for you. One is to do a little, we'll do a little training webinar specifically on spadix to show you the functionality that's in the release version once the release happens. So what you'll see when the version 020 product is released, then you'll see that you'll have a spadix install that comes as part of that. And so you'll be able to install and run with this. And again, the licensing is the same between all the different editions. So it doesn't matter what Bentley product you're on, whether you're running on spadix, it all uses the exact same license. And in fact, when we install the spadix version of the product, I installed it in the same directory as my current microstation Connect edition is installed in, so I don't even have to worry about making a copy of the license to be able to run the spadix edition. I just load the IX app into spadix to be able to run with it. Let's see here, what else am I missing? I think that's the majority of the new features and functionality. As part of this port, we have encountered a few different bugs that were introduced with some of the different key-ins and with some of the focus issues. One of them being like if you did something and then all of a sudden you couldn't get back to your TerraPhoto main window. Those are fixed in the upcoming release. I think we found all of the ones that were problems, but certainly if you see any, let us know and we'll get them fixed as soon as possible for you, so that we can get rid of those types of problematic things that we've seen in some of the newer versions. But those, for the most part, should be all addressed at this point. So, all right, I think we're getting, like I said, I think that kind of gives you the a quick and dirty overview of everything that's kind of been added in. The documentation is there on the on our knowledge base, so support.goq.com. If you look up in the Terrasolid update section, you'll see the what's new in Terrasolid January 2020. That includes downloads of all these presentations on each of the different product packages. That's Match, Modeler, Scan, Photo, Stereo. I may have put the survey stuff in with the stereo. I forget now. I'll have to go back and double check because there were some updates to the stereo as well, or to survey. In fact, survey is the first one to be released, version 20. They released that yesterday, although they haven't started sending out any licenses yet. So a couple things. Don't install the version 20 product until you have your version 20 licenses. We expect the version 20 licenses will start to be sent out in the next week or so. It will take a while to get them out to everybody. I would say if you don't have your version 20 licenses by February 15th, please let us know. The changeover period this year is the end of February. So your version 19 licenses will stop working on February 28th. I think they forgot that this is a leap year and that there's actually February 29th, but your licenses for version 19 will not work on February 29th. That's not a leap year problem. That's just your licenses expired on the 28th. And so you will have to have your version 20 licenses in place and running by then. All right, any questions? All right, so a couple questions. Does spadex allow importing, exporting? Not at the moment, but we expect it will within probably the first 6 months of the year. Does spadex work with GOQ? Spadex does not work with GOQ, and we will evaluate the capability to add that and whether it makes any sense to do so as the year progresses and we see a spadex version that's a little bit more mature than the beta. Spadex will be available with the release of the product. It should be a combined installer that allows you to install spadex and allows you to install, your choice of which of the products, which of the Terrasolid products you want to install. Do you have to use the F-by-F format when using spadex? No, you do not. You have the capability of using all the different formats that are capable within the product. So you have all those same choices in spadex that you have when creating a project or reading from the different file formats. So you're not restricted to just the fast binary format. You have the full functionality of Terrasolid, like I said, minus a very few tools that require or rely on the cell library. The cell library pieces do not function in spadex. Other than that, it's just the same as you're running in microstation today. Let me double check before I say this. Yes, we are recording this webinar. So this webinar will be available. The site that I've given you on where to find the documents will also be updated here with a link to the webinar. And because you're sitting through this webinar with us, you will receive an email probably about noon or so tomorrow at Central Standard Time that will contain that link in it as well. So that will be coming. All right, so we will be doing, of course, our standard, we offer on-site training in September of this year. Matt, if you want to throw up that slide. In September of this year, we're going to host a GOQ workshop. We're going to host that in Huntsville, Alabama at the Westin Huntsville. And that workshop, as you see here, is going to be September 28th through October 1st. So I'm giving up my birthday so you guys can all join me. We are going to be covering the LP360 product. We'll be covering different workflows in Terrasolid. If there's a particular tool, functionality, workflow that would entice you to join us in September, we have not set the schedule yet. We will have Artu here. Artu Soinen's the lead developer of the Terrasolid products, and he will be here in September to teach those courses. If you would like something covered in that period, please let us know. We are trying to get a session finalized in the next probably next few weeks. So if you have any input, we would very much appreciate that. We would certainly like you to join us. So we would like to be offering the type of training that you would like to come and see. And again, we have, for very specific on-site training that covers, very detailed in workflows that you use or data sets that you use or your own systems, that sort of thing. We do offer that. I do spend a lot of my time on the road with clients and helping them out through different things. So you can contact us there. And we'll work with that. One last question here. Did it ever fix the grouping routines? No, there is a problem in the microstation version that you can encounter some issues if you're not in meters when using the grouping. I've not tested it yet in spadex. Spadex does have some similar setup in terms of handling the units of resolution and the coordinate system as the microstation platform does. However, it's not as complex. So hopefully the problems that I've seen on the microstation side, we don't have that same problem running the grouping on the spadex side, but I have to look into it. I've only been working with it a week. Give me a little bit more time. All right. Thank you for joining us. Matt, you get the wrap up there?
Yep, I'll do the wrap up. So again, like Derek said, thanks for joining us. This webinar has been recorded and it's going to be distributed to everyone that's registered. So just keep that in mind. Again, if you got any questions or any input for the training in September, please let us know. I'm going to leave the webinar up for just a minute. If you have any additional questions, throw them into the question box and we'll get back to you after the webinar. Again, thanks for joining us today and we hope to hear from you soon.